if you look on TikTok and Instagram, everyone's raving, especially about like Nick Cutter's The Troop, which is like
Yes, well,
it's like
yeah,
your
exactly.
debut book, and everyone loved it because it's so gory and so horrific, and that's kind of like
Well, yeah,
like a
that's the
go-to book though
aesthetic.
for
That's
Halloween.
no, you're right. Yeah, I suppose it's fortunate, I think, it's nice, it's apropos. This book, the Queen, was meant to come out, I think, in August.
Right.
Initially we had to push it because I was still editing it. But I think Halloween is probably the better time to get it out there anyways, you know. So I mean it's certainly my favorite time of the year. So yeah, it's been a whirlwind, but it normally is a bit of a whirlwind. But I mean, the whirlwind for an author is still a pretty low key whirlwind.
Oh, I don't know. I think you're being. I don't know. I don't know. I mean, I only just I kind of I got into a reading rut for a while, and and then kind of like the last couple of years, I've really gotten into it,
I
and
can see the side there. You've got
I've
Keith
got
Ross's books
I've got the
there and
true. Yeah,
Nat
I was going to
Katz.
mention Keith Ross on because the Queen. I don't like comparing books, but the Queen kind of it's got that same vibe, but it makes some different
Yeah,
genres
I
in it.
like. Hey, listen, I like that sort of side by side. I really like Keith. I've been reading Keith way back. He used to publish with a press called Meerkat, like The Mercy of the Tide, and I think Smoke City was another one. And so yeah, I knew Keith before he was cool. He's always been cool, but you know
He's
what I
always
mean?
been
Like,
he's cooler than he used to be.
yeah, exactly.
So listen, I mean, obviously the obvious generic question, but I've got to ask because there are it blends so many genres in here. Um, where did the specific seed come from for this kind of idea? Was it the kind of the this theme? I don't want to. It's difficult to give it away. Did you reverse engineer, let's say, or did you get the idea kind of like for an opening scene, like somebody might do for a film, and then work that way?
And
How did you
then
go about this one?
yeah, it kind of probably must have come by fits and starts with this one. I've always been interested, the troop or the deep, they kind of there's that Promethean aspect. There's the mad scientist, Frankenstein, somebody, usually a man, who has a mad ambition, and usually involves tinkering with genomes and taking some element of the natural world and perverting it. And maybe even at some level, there's something beneficial at the core of an idea, but based on hubris and just the kind of wacky specimens that humans are, it goes haywire and awry. So in that way, it fits pretty comfortably within the whole Cutter aesthetic, I guess. And I think I'm clearly pretty interested in following teenage or preteen characters as well. It's not like I don't do adult books, but I think there's something interesting to me about catching people on the cusp of adulthood, um, instead of actually at adulthood. Maybe they become less interesting to me at that point, just because maybe their motivations are less pure, or there's a lesser, they can fall, like it's a shorter fall, I guess. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Um, so yeah, it's hard to sort of like, I mean, sort of in the editorial process, we did a lot of changing and shifting of the actual, like, just the mechanics of the plot, because I had never really done a book where you're writing it in one day, basically, where the the,
Right.
the
Yeah.
events transpire over the course of a day. Um, so that was a challenge. But yeah, no, I would say sort of the inception of the idea, it was just something, that my brain burped up, and I'm like, oh, there's another Cutter idea. Okay, off we go to the writing lab and see what we can see what we can make of this.
Uh-huh. I mean, before I should talk about the book itself, I don't actually have a physical copy. I was reading it on my Kindle, but I mean, the artwork is just out of this world, fantastic. I love it.
They did a great
Uh,
job.
do
They
you have
did a
much
great
to say
job.
what in terms of the artwork for your books?
Well, I don't normally, but this one they asked, sort of, if we can help in it, not sort of like, what is your idea, Craig, more or less? And I said I really liked 80s, horror paperbacks, and I knew this had insects. And there was a movie by, maybe it was Dario Argento, called Creepers, and it
Creepers, right?
starred a very young Jennifer Connelly, and
Jennifer
she could,
Connelly,
like,
yeah.
control insects. Do you know this one? Yeah. And the cover of
Yeah.
that one is a girl's face, and it's insects down one side of it. And I might have actually even sent them that movie cover. And I forgot about it
It
because
was
that
also,
was
is it
like,
also called Phenomenon now? Is it called Phenomenon as well, the
I
film?
think,
I think
yes, I think it was called
that's right.
Creepers and then Phenomenon, or
Yeah,
yeah,
right.
something that got mixed up in translation or different. Yes, but that's the movie we're
That's the
talking about
film.
from
Yeah, I know which one you mean. Yeah,
yeah, and I think it was Dario Argento. I think it
it
was the
was. Yeah, it was.
Italian
Yeah, that's
director.
right. Yeah,
Yeah, okay, so I got that part right. But yeah. So in when they came over with that cover, like, oh, okay, well, in this way it does seem resonant of that old cover of Argento, different, but also like seemed to have been called from it. And I thought, well, it's perfect for me. So yeah, that was probably one of the few times in my life that anything I said had any bearing on the art director, and that's great.
brilliant. So, you mentioned there when you were describing how you came up with the idea that you like to deal with kind of adolescence on the cusp of adulthood. No,
Mhm.
I'm assuming you're probably around the same age as me, which is we're a bit past that age now. So what
Sure.
is it about that that kind of draws you back? Because there was one specific moment in the book where, without giving anything away, the two of the main kids that we follow in the book don't really attend school as much as they should do, no? So when they
Right.
when they do go back for a specific reason, they are kind of they're describing it, or you describe it as like they've not been in it for like 10, 15, 20 years. So how
Yeah.
do you, as a writer, kind of quite a bit older than the people
Mhm.
that you're writing about. How do you approach that? Did you go back to your old school maybe and kind of feel things out a bit?
Howard, yeah, hit the nail on the head. I mean,
Really?
again, there are some writers who are, Stephen King obviously comes to mind, Ray Bradbury, who seem to have a intimate connection with their childhood selves, and it's as though they can summon details through, I don't know, through some alchemy, really, that
Yeah.
are as strong as though they'd lived them yesterday. Most of us obviously don't have that. We retain a few memories and meaningful ones to us, and then the rest of it is sort of just very difficult to recapture. And I certainly was plagued by that as well. So yeah, what did I do? I went back. I live in Toronto, and the
Right.
book is set in St. Catharines, which geographically is like an hour and a half away. And my parents still live there. My brother still lives there. We go there quite often. But I hadn't gone back to my old school. Have no real reason to do so. But I swear to you, walking those hallways, smelling like it smells the same. Even that sort of had an amazing facility of sort of pulling you back to that time in your life. And then I dragged out yearbooks. I don't even know if they do yearbooks anymore, but we did at
Right.
my point in the 1990s. And I went through them, and it was a little heartbreaking to see all those unlined, innocent faces that now we know are not that, halfway through our lives probably. But at the same point, that had a very effective quality of pulling me back. And a lot of the memories were not valuable for the book that I was writing, but as an actual exercise, it was. I was surprised at how profound it was in terms of bringing those memories back and allowing me to sort of do my best to surface myself at that time. But again, I I wrote the book set in 2018, so the time that is elapsed in those 30 years, and the way that culture has changed, and the way that high school is surely very different. I can't do anything for that. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
That
sure.
is something that, yeah, that's something that's beyond me. I just had to hope that there are certain sort of universalities in the teenage experience that would be the same, outside of time, and I tried to focus on those.
No, but that technique definitely played off. Worked it played off because paid off. Sorry, because obviously when I was reading it, it really came across as though I was going back to my old school, and so
Oh,
I just
good.
kind of presumed that maybe that was what you'd done and you had done. Yeah, so yeah, it
Yeah, very
worked
much so.
really
Very
well.
much. I patterned it on the school itself is my old school. You know what I mean? Like down to its architecture and everything. It just felt easy. Like why change this? The
Yeah, yeah.
school's not going to upset, So, I can go ahead and use that aspect of it without there were other parts though. I had to be very careful to be like, you know, in using any of my memories for evil, for lack of a better word, or for any of my childhood associates or people I didn't like,
Sure.
even them to twist their way into the narrative somehow. I think that's a danger that some writers face, myself included, is that like, yeah, you want to go close enough that you can sort of get that feeling, but you don't want to go so far that you're starting to like pinpoint people in a book
Yeah.
that's gonna,
Get
you
someone
know,
knocking on your door and saying, "Hey,
well, yeah,
yeah,
that's was that me? And so maybe even in an early draft, I would go and I would see a character. I'm like, you know what? I got to shave the edges off that character or erase them entirely because that is clearly homing in a little too closely on somebody who, is alive at this point.
sure, yeah." I mean, you mentioned they're also kind of like you're going back to school, and obviously things have changed since then. Typically, especially in horror movies, but usually in horror books as well, technology doesn't fare too well for me anyway. I prefer not to read things that are kind of a lot of technology. I mean, it depends on the story. But here,
Mhm.
there's a lot of use of the iPhone, the mobile phone, the cell phone, and it works. It couldn't work better. It just works so well here because you need it to keep the story moving along. The pace of the story and what goes on in the story, it really needs it this time.
Yeah, I'm glad you thought so. You know, I patterned it. I say in the acknowledgments, there's this book, 13 Reasons Why, which is a YA book, um, but uses Walkman tapes, sort of as and I replaced a Walkman and the tapes with a cell phone, and partially because it's, an update for like 2018 and beyond, but also because it allows you to do a lot of different things, including texting, videos, whatever, access to the internet. But yeah, I kind of like when the final copy showed up and I sort of paged through it and I saw the text, I thought, no, I don't know, this fits. It fits. It kind of introduces an interesting kind of texture element. So yeah, it was. I think I've seen it in other books as well. I certainly wouldn't claim that I'm the first who's ever done it,
No,
but
sure,
I like,
but
yeah,
for
it looks good.
this particular story, I just felt it kind of pulled me more into the story
Yeah.
because I was actually physically seeing the texts
Yeah,
coming
yeah,
up on
yeah. You know
the.
how kids write too? They write much more a shorthand. Like I have a son and we'll text sometimes and I'll write him, like, I don't know, 17 sentences, not that long, say three, and he'll be like,
I see
okay.
what you mean. Yeah,
Sometimes it'll just be a K, just K. I'm like,
yeah,
then I'll see him texting with his friends and they're equally as brief with each other. So you know
uh-huh.
what I mean? And they're equally as like spell check is not something that really matters so much to them. So it was kind of fun to write as I would assume a teenager might in text because you really can throw grammar and spelling out the window.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, definitely. So I obviously I can't speak too much about the characters, but I also want to speak about the main. I don't know if we can call him protagonist, antagonist. He's kind of like a
Sure.
Dr. Frankenstein type character. We can go that far. Now we can say that.
Yeah, sure, certainly.
Um, like you said, you don't want to kind of go too close to anybody that you've kind of But where did this kind of the idea for this character come from? I mean, obviously, I can you can see inspiration from Frankenstein there, but
Yeah,
he's a very
yeah.
specific character with very specific reasons for the things that he does, not just his actions, but also things that he does with himself to himself that I don't want to spoil, of course.
Right. Right. Yeah. He was a fun character to write. There was a psychopath character in the troupe who also was there's something about writing someone who is completely unshackled from all morality and all governing forces. It's sort of like the equivalent of a truck with no brakes just careening down a hill, right? There's something breathtaking about maybe writing a character like that. So he is very much has a bit of Elon Musk in him. You probably remember
Definitely. I
back
mean,
in the
when you were mentioning then about Dr. Frankenstein, I think that was the first person I was thinking of was Elon
Yeah,
Musk.
right. There we have a modern Frankenstein. I'm sure Elon is probably amongst the rank for that. But there was a point before the pandemic with him and Bezos were fighting to get into space first. Um, and I don't know who won really. I think Bezos just got bored and stopped doing it really, and that Elon has clearly kept doing it. But I thought, sort of not to give away anything, but if you were gonna this villain, this kind of antagonist, settles on this very bizarre thing that he wants to bring into the world. And the hardest thing for me at first was like, why in God's name would anyone want to do this? Like at the furthest reaches of any kind of mania. But I thought, well, okay, maybe if he was this space guy and he wanted to create a life form that would be durable to sort of live on a distant planet, okay, maybe he would start tinkering around in that way. And that just didn't harmonize really with me. It felt it kind of met the quota, but it didn't really activate me. And so frankly, Howard, I just thought, what is the most absurd trauma that someone might go through as a child that would repattern their entire existence and potentially push them to this bizarre mandate that he ends up adopting. And so that's when it really gelled for me, anyways. And I thought, okay, now I know this guy. I know where he's coming from. I can even, in a weird way, kind of empathize with him in that, like the things that happen to us when we're
That's the thing,
children.
yeah. That's why I said antagonist, protagonist, because there are various things
How do
there
you
that
outrun it, right? How do
just
you
cannot
outrun?
help
I always,
empathizing with him at all. Yeah,
yeah. It's like I always feel very bad for children who are in cults because it's like, yeah, okay, you come to embrace some very strange reasonings, but like you were born into that and you
yeah.
never
Or
had a
say,
chance to really
yeah.
form your own opinions, right? So yeah, yeah. So in any case, he was, he is obviously a very damaged individual, and he passes that trauma on to others. But at the same point, he was a fun character to write, and I don't know what that says about me, but I'll just admit it.
No, no, it's a fantastic character. I mean, that's what I really appreciate about kind of like the antagonists that you can't when you start sympathizing, empathizing with these kind of characters. That is that's the hallmarks of the perfect antagonist for me. I mean,
Right.
I
I'm
mean,
glad you.
I
So
mean,
yeah, I
I
like how you
always
said
talk.
protagonist and antagonist. So yeah, yeah, of
But I always think of I mean like my favorite antagonist in the movie is Hans Gruber in Die Hard, who's such this
course.
charming guy. I mean, obviously you don't sympathize when you don't empathize, but you just love him because he's just this charming guy, but he's just pure evil at the same time.
Yeah,
And so those kind of
yeah,
characters are
exactly.
just perfect.
Hannibal Lecter,
Same,
there's
yeah,
so many, obviously. The pantheon
sure.
of great villains is probably as deep as great heroes. And both are equally fun to create. So yeah, I don't know if I've ever actually created a true hero, but I've certainly created my share of villains. But they kind of, horror leans on villains at some level, maybe more so than other genres.
Yeah, definitely, man. Especially more so now. Yeah, sure. Um, Also, talking of this guy, this person who I don't want to go too much into, but he does. I mean, you mentioned there that he's been through trauma and that kind of leads him to do what he does.
Mhm.
And it mentions in the book that he kind of he goes through this trauma, that's when he realizes what his purpose in life is. So I just want to turn that on its head, and because you wrote about that, you wrote that in the book. Was there a specific turning point for you when you realized your purpose was to write these kind of horror books?
Oh, wow, what a
I
great
imagine it wasn't
question.
the same as this.
Feel like
This time,
I'm on
what
the
you went through.
therapist couch now. Gonna have to, reveal the grotty underpinnings of my id. Um, well, the truth is, Howard, I just always probably more just a sense of like I'm a very obsessive person, I guess, and I was very much influenced, as anyone could tell, reading the books. I mean, I'm clearly influenced by my betters, by like Barker and Rice and Lovecraft, but overall by King. And I fell under his spell when I was very young, in the 80s, and it must have cemented itself somewhere in my head at a very young age that wouldn't it be cool if I can just be a part of this world? And then it became like, how could I do that? And for the longest time, I wrote, sort of quote unquote literary fiction because I went to a school up here in Canada to get a master's degree.
Right.
And at the time, even if I wanted to write a horror book, they weren't going to let me. It just was not on the mandate or the remit at
Yeah.
that point. Uh, so I wrote, a collection of stories, which ended up getting published, and that sent me on a very interesting and fun life as a whatever, quote unquote, literary writer. But then I had this opportunity about 10 years into that career to, had this idea that clearly was not literary. I was galvanized by it, but it wasn't anything that I'd written before. But it harkened back to my true love. So it ended up allowing me to sort of spend the last decade of my life writing as Nick Cutter. And so yeah, I don't know if there was any single moment, and if it is, it's now sketched away in my memory, but there's definitely been an obsessive focus, and there was for the greater part of my young life anyways, to just be a part of this world. And by hook or by crook and by luck and by gumption, I've managed to do it until
Find
I've,
your way
as you
through.
can see, I got gray hairs coming in. So yeah.
Ah, brilliant. Um, Also, something that still touching on this trauma, um, things get really gory pretty much
Off the hop.
very off the hop. Yeah, the very first page. Um, I don't. I mean, I've read quite, as you can see, I read quite a few horror books, and they don't usually get so. beautifully gory. The explanations of exactly what I mean. You're very, very. I don't usually like books that serve things on a tray, but the way that you serve the goriness on a tray to really, really get that picture in our minds as what's going on
Right.
is just so beautifully done. Yeah, beautiful is the right word, I think. Yeah.
I
Um,
hope so. It's the kind of you to say so. I mean, not everyone would share that belief, but I think so. Again, when I wrote The Troop and I saw tapeworms up close, I do think there's a certain beauty or organic beauty to things that would fill other people with revulsion. So if anything, I'm just taking that sense of beauty that I must feel and doing my best to transmit it on the page, recognizing that it ain't for everybody. You know what I mean?
oh,
So you've got to, at some level, accept that that what you are giving to the world will not be accepted by all parties, and that's fine. Everyone is
mhm.
allowed to have their own. And I think with this book too, yeah, I just sort of wanted to sort of let the parameters of the battlefield be etched out pretty quickly, and so you would know, hey, you want to stick on, great, I'd love to have you, and if you don't, then you know now you know I haven't like laid a trap for you, and then you find 100 pages in that it's going to go this way.
Yeah, Mills and Boon book. No, but I
Yeah.
mean, but I mean, for example, like the Troop is I mean, it was your first a novel, and everyone talks about how revolting it is, no, in the best possible sense. Do you find that is a hindrance in any way because you've got to up the ante, or not?
No.
Nothing, not at all, because people know what they're getting into with the Nick Cutter book, so you can kind of go where you want to go, and it doesn't have to up the ante
Yeah.
precisely.
Yeah. I think that's probably like I think those scenes come to me naturally. They must be germinated by, again, the whole process of which I don't want to delve into deeply, and which I really have no knowledge of. To a degree, it's things that are clanking around up here, which
Mhm.
I'm not quite sure how they present themselves or where they come from.
Mhm.
But I'm not digging deeply to find those kind of scenes or even that aesthetic. I think that's just the aesthetic I write under. And probably there is now, maybe to a small degree, a reticence, because like I certainly could write softer, just like a soft writer could write harder if they
Sure.
chose to. I choose to write the way I choose to write, and that's my choice. And it's, ultimately we all take our careers, I suppose, in our hands by doing so. But as you said with The Troop, like that was a true expression of the way that I wanted to write. And the people who liked it for the reasons that they like it. And the people who don't like it obviously are justified in not liking it for the reasons that they don't like it. But uh, for me, I guess it's for me, it's like reading so much and YouTube reading so much and watching so many movies. It'd almost be strange to see someone, their aesthetic completely changes. In a way, you'd almost be amazed to see it. That'd be like a leopard changing his or her spots.
Yeah.
But it's not surprising that you don't see it very often because we are who we are as people and as writers or artists of any stripe. And yeah, we probably have that aesthetic that is we feel is the best way of presenting our view of the world.
Mhm. And I mean, I think it worked perfectly because we really need to see, again, without spoiling it, we really need to see what causes certain things to
Right.
happen later on, and why they do it. Um, but at the same time, does Nick Cutter have any kind of limits, anything that are off limits that he won't write any specific kind of gory, violent scenes of any kind or for
You'd
any
be amazed
specific
how often
reason?
I get that question, Howard. You'd be amazed how often I get that question. You're not the first to have asked it, and I totally
Right.
understand it. I hypothetically I must. You know what I mean? I have two kids. Um, my cat was sitting over here just a second ago. She's decided to go elsewhere. Like I lead a very boring quotidian life. There is no torture dungeon, or there's no, there's no bodies in the backyard or anything. So I suppose hypothetically there must be some limit. And I've probably, when I was younger, I read a lot of books. It's funny about the Cutter stuff is that I know it's rough, but I also know there's much rougher because I went there and I investigated those places in my
Right.
teens and early 20s because that was the journey that I was on, I guess. Um, and so and so having read those, I suppose that even informs my own sense of like what are my thresholds, and it's impossible to guess somebody else's thresholds too. So you just
Yeah.
can't you can't worry about that too much. But to answer your question, there has to be. I have not come across that yet, but I'm sure there would be a scene or an idea. I mean, I don't. Yeah, I mean, I can think of stuff that I've read in other books that I would say no, I couldn't quite go there. I don't think I would take myself there, but that's also because I don't think in reading those books, it's like they're plumbing a completely different narrative terrain than I am. And so
Right.
it's like it's two things that are never going to meet each other anyways. But
Yeah.
I also don't think I would dig a tunnel over there narratively and try and write about
I
those
get that.
things.
Yeah.
So yeah, yeah. So there are. I try not to let that sort of inhibit me, but I'm sure there are.
Okay, brilliant. And also, obviously, we know that there's something about insects in the book because of the cover more than anything. We know there's a wasp on there. So,
Yeah.
and again, I
We
don't
can
want to
talk
spoil
about
anything at all because
that.
it's
No,
such a
no,
great
that's
book. So, but all I want to ask you really about is the themes and the topics that we do get into are quite scientific. It's not
Mhm.
like it's not like we're reading a science book. No way. But some of the things there that are explained in the book about what goes on are really at least they sounded to me very scientific and very authentic. So I imagine you really went down quite a deep rabbit hole to get the kind of what these things that were happening
I did. I
could
did.
actually happen and had
Yeah,
kind of
yeah,
scientific explanations behind them.
I did. I did with the troop too. A lot of the scientific stuff in there. I mean, I like Crichton, like Michael Crichton is the master at sort of, at least to me, man, it can all be bullshit science. Ultimately, a lot of it is, but it feels authentic, right? So
Yeah.
yeah, for me, I enjoy the research. And the one thing that I really focused on in this one was QMP, which is queen mandibular pheromone, which is we release pheromones. You and I,
Yeah.
humans do at a low level, but queens have this, and there's only like I think four queens in the insect world, wasps being one of them, and they use it to control their nest and keep everything in harmony. Because if it falls into disharmony or if the queen dies, like basically the entire thing goes into chaos. So it's benevolent almost. But if you or I had that ability to like essentially hypnotize massive numbers of people from a long way away, like if my son had it, he's upstairs right now and he thinks, Dad, go make me a sandwich. And then I go upstairs and I make him a sandwich. And then if he doesn't like the sandwich, he says, Dad, jump out the window. You know what I mean? Like that kind of that's just the idea of somebody. And we've seen horror stories like that too. Carrying Comfort by Dan
Oh, all the
Simmons, a little bit
telekinesis
about
things, all these kind of things. Yeah.
telekinesis, mind vampires, the ability to sort of like make somebody else do something that they don't want to do, which you want them to do, which is quite frankly one of the most terrifying things I can think of, really. Probably will investigate that down the road in a different book. But yeah, so it was interesting the interplay of like the insect world where these things are just natural, benevolent, valuable, transferred to the human world are amoral and scary as hell.
No, I mean, you mentioned the pheromones. I was just really, really wrapped by that when I got to the section where they start talking about the pheromones and the power that they can
Right.
have over people. It was just, yeah, it was like you said, it was tropes that we have that we're familiar, but in a completely different way, which I really, really loved.
Yeah, good. I appreciate it, Howard. I really do. Thank you. Thank you kindly for your kind words.
hmm So I don't want to keep you any longer. So I mean, just to finish off, obviously, you've got this book coming out now, but I do know that the Troop and the Deep
Yes.
are in preparation for. I think the Troop is for a film with James Wan, no producing. If I'm not
Well,
mistaken.
yes, he's involved. There's and yeah, the Deep is with Amazon right now, and it's
Right.
got some nice creative people involved. But uh, m- me for it's funny. My very first book, Rust and Bone, was made into a wonderful French movie by a French director called Jacques Audiard. And I thought, oh, well, this is how it goes. You write a book and then they make a movie about it. And, you sort of get one and then the other. As soon as you do one, they'll make a movie out of it. You realize, now 15 books later,
Yeah,
Yeah, no, that was a kind of a one-off for me, and at least to this point in my life and career. So there's so many things that tend to get in the way, and so I mean, they have had the troop option for years now, and
right.
I mean, essentially, as you know, having read it, it's about kids dying. It's that's tough to sell in the flyover states sometimes.
It's in the
So
States. Yeah, I mean, Battle Royale was a huge movie, and it's gone something down
well,
really,
you're
really
right.
badly.
Yeah,
But
yeah. The Japanese movie, even Hunger Games to a degree, which
sure,
obviously I think was inspired by Battle Royale, involves, kids do die. So you're right. It's not something that is completely anathema to filmmaking, but they have seemed to have had, not that I'm aware of it, and sort of everything that is going on with these projects goes on without my involvement. Even if I wanted to be involved, they would just hang up the
right.
phone on me. That's fine. I mean, I think there's a sense that the writer is going to be an encumbrance. Me, I'd just sort of like be a puppy dog, like, hey, what are you guys doing? Cool, like, whatever you're doing. But anyway, they're doing their own thing. Um, but from what I can tell, anyways, from the intel that I gather from time to time, it's just movies are hard to make. A book is an investment, obviously, but it's like the writer is on board, the editor buys it, the publisher publishes it. It's a fairly seamless sort of, and even that's hard enough, as anyone who's tried to sell a book knows. But a film involves so many more working parts and such an enormous amount of money comparatively that it's really not surprising that so few of them get made. Sometimes you're head scratching your heads at the ones that get made,
Yeah,
but that's another story
that's
entirely.
the way. Yeah, depends who's got the money in their back pockets. Yeah,
You got it.
but having said that, I mean, for example, The Queen is it's so cinematic. It just from like the opening scene all the way through, it would be a fantastic movie. So because there are so many, like you said, there's so many working parts. Have you ever kind of considered writing a screenplay yourself and pitching it
Oh,
to
I've
produce?
tried.
Yeah,
Poorly. Yeah, I've tried. My friend and I wrote one. We've written a few, and try to fly them up the flagpole here and there. I mean, that's as you know, I suppose, right? That's kind of the seductive siren song. It's like there's always a producer who's going to say, "Have you ever thought about, writing your own movie? And would you like to do that?" And you sort of get beguiled down that primrose path, and some people can do it, right? There's the Nick Pizzolattos and Richard Prices and people who make that transition between being a novelist and being a screenwriter and seem to do it effortlessly. My own countryman Ian Reid has done it, and a good dude and a really good writer.
yeah,
To this point, Howard, have not been able to clear that chasm, but if such point I'd have that opportunity, I would absolutely do it. It just hasn't eventualized yet.
yeah. Uh-huh. Focusing on the books for now, no? Yeah. Uh-huh.
You bet. You bet.
Uh-huh. That's good. Well, listen, thank you so much for your time,
Hey,
Nick.
my pleasure.
I love the book to bits. Um, I hadn't actually read The Troop yet, so I bought it and I'm gonna dive straight into this one now.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay, okay. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Well, I'm glad you like Keith's. I think he's excellent, and
Oh, he's fantastic.
I'm
Gonna go
glad him
through,
getting the credit that he deserves now. So, good guy, good writer. Anyway, as soon as I saw those two books, even when we got them, oh, me and Howard will get on well. He
yeah,
if
yeah,
he
right, get
likes.
on, yeah, yeah. But
All
listen,
right.
thank you so much for your time. I wish you
Hey,
the
my
best of
pleasure.
luck with the book, and I hope to speak to you again sometime soon about another book or maybe a screenplay or a film or whatever comes
Happy
up
to do
soon.
so. All
All right,
right.
thanks so much
Thanks.
for your time again. Have a best day. All right, take care of yourself. Bye now.